Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today, my goodness, Lisa, my guest, Lisa, is a joy teacher. How does somebody become a joy teacher?
It's like being circus people, right?
Well, is it? It kind of is, actually, when you think about it. Oh, Lisa and I met, golly, it would have been right before the pandemic in 2020 in San Diego at an event which oh man, there's so much I could say about extreme leadership and Steve Farber, but it was a really fun encounter. And Lisa, I have to tell you that your face is so magnetic that every time I would see you in the crowd, I'm just drawn to you.
Oh,
but true,
like attracts like,
right?
Because we're vibing together,
right? And this is what joy is all about, at least in my world. So Lisa, we met there. We didn't spend a ton of time together, but it just felt like you were my people. And I've been following you since, and now's the time for the world, my world, to know more about you. So I'm grateful you're here. So before we jump in, Lisa is amazing and has the bio that will just go on forever. She's an author. She's written more than 40 books and a lot of children's books. If you have ever heard of the Stinky Face series, you need to know this is the author of that series. Lisa has also been teaching joy, which we're going to hear more about, and so many other things. My goodness, she's co-authored with industry leaders such as Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, James Von Prague, Sonny Don Johnston. So you're getting a feeling of who this amazing human is. Very energetic, very spiritual. There's a lot more to Lisa than I can read from a bio. So I just want to jump right in.
Beautiful. Let's jump right in. I love it.
So I always want to know on my podcast about getting real. I love where we are now. I love where we all find ourselves now. And part of where we find ourselves now comes from the choices and decisions that we've made up to now. And so we're going to talk a lot about all the amazingness that you bring to the world now, Lisa, but I'd like to know more about you, like how you became you. I know you live in Florida now, but I'd like to know more about you. So where would you start in that question?
Oh my goodness. I think like many people who do this kind of work that you and I do of raising consciousness, do that from a place of necessity. We perhaps at some point in our lives realize this is what is absolutely the most critical thing that I need to apply my attention to now, is learning how to elevate my own consciousness, elevate out of, in my case, I call it joy because I was not, I didn't come from a naturally joyful situation. Like very, very many of us, there was trauma. There was a lot to overcome, a lot of darkness in my childhood and my early years. And I, out of that, you build a framework, and we'll, I'm sure talk about that framework building, but you then just create a life around your expectations. So in my early adulthood, there was a lot of darkness, a lot of creating from what I had been taught the world is, and I am, and who I am, and what I deserve. And I talk to a lot of people on my podcast and in interviews who have had a spiritual awakening. There's like a moment, there's a time, but I really believe that for most of us, it's crumb by crumb. And that's what my early adulthood was just one crumb after another, just was starting to get into that flow of the synchronicity of finding the next teacher and the next teacher and the next teacher and getting the next certification and the next trainer's certificate. So I didn't always work as a personal growth teacher. I worked in publishing for my first dozen or so years out of college, and that's where the writing background came in. But certainly it was always my passion. My first glimpse was, I know that I was 14 because I have all my early journals and journaling was always my lifeline. That was my therapy. And you know how they say 10,000 hours of anything, you're going to get better at it. I think I probably spent 10,000 hours of writing in my journals as a child, just to really as my lifeline, my way of staying connected to myself and who I was. And so that was always like what I thought was my only superpower, the only thing I did well. And it was just purely because I did it so much. But so I went into publishing early on, but personal development was always my side gig. Oh, I know where I was going. Sorry. At 14, somehow I got a copy of Your Erroneous Zones in my hands. That was Wayne Dyer's very first book. Nobody had heard of him yet. I would love to know how that happened, because that had to have been the biggest synchronicity. There was no reason that I should have had that book, but my little 14-year-old handwriting, I've just copied pages and pages and passages from this Wayne Dyer book, because it just lit me up so much inside to find that there was this person that saw the world through the way that I thought I was the only one here. This alien who had landed as the only person who saw the world this way. And then Wayne Dyer is putting it down in writing. And I think that's what started my whole, once I found out there are other books like this, or other authors like this, or other people who see the world this way, it just became so compelling to just want to build that tribe and be in that energy.
Your Erroneous Zones was a 14-year-old book. Come on.
No,
Really? I
no, and
know.
I'm sure that I have no idea what the wordplay was about. Like that was not one of the things that made it into the journal, was like, oh, what clever wordplay. No, I had no idea what that was.
It's so funny, because wasn't that the wordplay was your erogenous zones, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Oh, that's so funny.
Wayne was always a little saucy like that.
Yeah,
but it didn't really
exactly.
come through.
But that wasn't above your 14-year-old head, apparently. It was exactly in the space you needed it to be at the time.
I have no idea why I opened it, but once I did, it caught me.
Mhm.
It was like the thing that was, I guess, the turning point. The earliest turning point was when I realized that there was this other world where people just didn't operate the way everyone in my external world was operating.
Yeah. So you're going to hear more about that in this interview. If those of you are going, well, I don't even know what she's talking about. What is this book? Yes. Stay with us. There's a lot here. So Lisa, what was your college major then? English or writing?
It was English and writing. I actually started out as a psych major because I wanted to understand this, and then it just wasn't what I wanted. It was all about, the DM, whatever it was about maladies and treatments, and that was not what I was looking for.
Yeah.
I wanted to know why we do what we do, why we think the way we think, how we can think differently. That wasn't what I was getting out of my psych degree, so I switched to English.
And where were you raised? Where were you born and raised?
In the Northeast in New Jersey, Bergen County, New Jersey. I went to college at a little liberal arts school in New Jersey, Drew University.
And then you've been in Florida since then?
About 25 years.
Okay.
I've been in Florida. Yeah.
So there's a lot that gets us where we are. I'm sure the circuitous paths that take us in different directions, and where you found yourself because of that 14-year-old person that you were. I'm sure there were lots of twists and turns, and it's taken you to become a ghostwriter, which I need to learn more about. How that ever happens. You said it was publishing right away, which got you into the writing part about things. And so was your topic or your area of interest always joy?
I don't think I called it that early on. And it's funny, I just recently have been sort of having this thought that I'm not sure I even know how to articulate now, but it's that I think we need a better, more clear lexicon around personal growth, because that could mean so many things. But in my case, what always sort of caught me and lit me up was the spiritual angle, married with the personal growth principles. So it's really spirituality, marriage to pop psych. It's that recognition that there's something in there more. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. Well, so were you raised in a religious family? Like, is your background religion?
I was very close to my grandmother, who was religious, but no, we did not go to church. We had kind of a whole family situation around that. My grandmother was a Sunday school teacher, Southern Baptist, Jesus lady through and through, 1000%. And I was an unexpected teen pregnancy for my mom, which caused the family to be shunned from the church and my grandmother to lose that community. And there was a whole lot of shame, whole lot of shame. And that kind of kept us from ever belonging to a church as a family. But I did learn a lot about my grandmother's beliefs and spirituality. But I don't really equate much of that to what I consider to be a spiritual life or spiritual understandings, the tie to organized religion.
So were you raised by your mother or your grandmother?
Primarily my mother and a father. I'll say that, a father. And but my grandmother was always in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating how seeds get planted. That's the only way I can articulate it too, that come up in different ways and allow us different experiences. And so the fact that you're here for a huge purpose, I'm not going to say reason, I'm going to say purpose, because if it's a reason, I have to figure it out. And there's a lot of things that are bigger than that for me. And that's where I get into reason, where you said I was an unexpected teen pregnancy. Oprah has the same story, you know, about Oprah. And so there's something very cool about that, I think. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. And I'm sure there are a lot,
on it.
well, but I'm sure there were a lot of things that were not easy, you know, and you didn't recognize, I bet. And, you know, we don't have to get into all the details about that, but something caused you to be open to this book that came your way when you were 14, which every other 14-year-old in your life, I'm sure, was not interested in that kind of book. Would you say?
My secret.
Yeah.
Definitely. This wasn't something I talked about with anybody.
Did you have like friends that did other kinds of things at 14?
You mean spiritual?
No, I mean, no, not spiritual. I mean, like normal 14-year-old, and that's such a terrible way to say normal, but when I was,
sure, I'm sure. Yeah.
you know, worried about boys and worried about makeup and worried about all these
Super
things.
worried about boys.
Yeah. And externals. It feels like this was an internal awakening for you early, yet I guess I'm still working on that in my 50s. And I'm really fascinated by your experience at such an early age.
Yeah, it was an opening, and then, you know, just kind of like grew from there. But definitely it was a very private thing until, you know, probably my mid-20s when I started joining communities of like-minded people.
Interesting. So the connection piece, then there's I would bet that as young people, all of us as young people, when, you know, think back in your life, if you're listening to this, when you were, you know, grade school, elementary school, there's this sense of belonging, or this need or want to belong. I talked about this when we were together in San Diego back in 2020. I got a chance to be on stage for 4 or 5 minutes, and it occurred to me that belonging was what was missing for me. I wonder, Lisa, did you ever feel that you were searching for belonging in that secret of yours?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was convinced that I was the only person on the planet like me, that there was just something so wrong with me. I was always told too sensitive, right? That's a thing that a lot of people in our community here, and this, that I was too sensitive, and I could just look around and see that everybody else seemed to think in a way and just behave in a way that was so foreign to me. So definitely there was a lot of a feeling of a lack of belonging.
Did you then look at everybody else and compare your insides to their outsides?
Compare my insides to their outsides.
Because you can see their outsides.
Right.
You know your insides. So if what we're doing, even, you know, as adults, but especially as kids, is saying they have the right clothes, they have the right this, we don't have any idea what's going on inside them, but we know everything about what's going on inside us. So when I compare my insides, what I know deep down about myself, to their outsides, I'm never going to measure up.
Right.
And I wonder if as you did that, did you shut down some of what you thought was right for you to fit in?
Absolutely. I think most of us do, to some extent, in some way. That's when we start putting the masks on, and we just accumulate more and more masks as we progress. I think it's rare to find somebody at that stage in life, in middle school and high school, who isn't concerned with having all the right masks in place all the time.
For sure.
That
Did you have a
tribal
mentor?
instinct is so strong.
Yes. Did you have a mentor or a teacher or anybody who helped you in that way?
Not when I was very young, but I started having teachers. I was teaching TM in my early 20s. That was one of my earliest communities and group experiences, was really delving into the TM community. In college, I did huge study in Buddhism, which was mostly with the department head, the psychology department head at my university, but she put me in touch with a few other kids who had a similar interest, and I did an independent study. So I found little pockets of community along the way before the internet and the ability to assimilate the huge communities that we're able to grow now.
Yeah. How do you know Steve Farber?
through Beth LaFavor, who connected you and I.
Okay. So he is a TM guy too. That's what I was
Yeah,
wondering. So he went to college at Maharishi School of Management.
I know.
So I was wondering if that was a connection for you with him, but you didn't know him through that.
No.
Okay. So interesting. It's so I keep thinking about the word coincident.
Yeah.
And if you really dig back into what that word really means, there's no accident about it at all, is there?
No, I love that. I've never heard that broken down like that. Like, yeah, there's an incident and here's a coincident.
Yeah. It's
How
happening
random.
together at the same time. Oh, wow. Isn't that funny? Oh, there's so many ways we could go. So you went to college in English in writing and you got a job in publishing. How did you get into the space of now we would call it spirituality or what what do we woo woo? I know I hate saying that too, but we call it woo woo because people don't know what else to call it.
We used to call it new thought, and that's
You
kind of
thought,
faded away. I don't think people really say new thought anymore. It really needs a better vocabulary, like a more widespread agreed upon vernacular for what it is, I think.
yeah. So how did you identify that as a modality for your career?
Well, in publishing, I worked for a children's publisher. I was really immersed in that world. I had a really lucky first book in that regard. My I Love You Stinky Face book just broke all the records and has been in print for 25 years and has 10 sequels. And that was just something that opened doors. And one of those was that I had a lot of school visits or a lot of speaking engagements. And when you go to talk to a student body, they, you're on the taxpayers' dollar. They want to know, what are you going to talk about? And I would say, let's talk about creativity. And so they would bring me in on this assumption that I'm going to talk about creating your writing and your art and your poetry and your macaroni necklaces and your pillow forts. And instead, I would talk about creating your relationships, creating yourself, creating your next experience of your life, creating your relationship to your thoughts. And I'm thinking that I'm kind of like tricking the system there, but it was really popular. Like, people loved it. And I started having evening sessions for the parents and teachers. And I realized that, even though the kids were my doorway in, and it was so important to me that children have a foundation of this understanding, still I really got lit up talking to the adults because they're adults. It's like I can actually like have real conversations about it with them, and they're interested in it. And from that, it actually was some of my early training. I started doing workshops, like 8-week workshops around the creativity process. And from there, I put together a book that I sold to Hay House. And that was the turning point where I wasn't a children's author anymore. I was a spiritual author.
It feels, I know there's a lot more to it than that, because it feels like when you say that, I just got lucky and oh, it just happened early. I think there's more to it than that, don't you?
I always tell people there's got to be some element of luck, because there are so many really wonderful books for children and adults and young adults that don't sell millions of copies. So there's some element of luck. But I do know that the moment that I wrote that was completely a channeled, divinely inspired moment. I do know that just came out of nowhere and was there. And I felt like, this is something I really want to put out in the world. I didn't consider myself an author. I didn't have any aspirations to be an author. I was an editor, and I was a book buyer for the book clubs. I would decide which books would be in those little newsprint flyers, and I would go out to all the publishers and make the deals and the rights so that we could use the books in the book clubs. So I was a business person in publishing. I didn't think of myself as an author. And it was when I was pregnant with my first child that I was just musing about how much I loved this little grain of rice that I knew absolutely nothing about. And like, how freaky weird is that I'm so welled up with love and I have no idea this could be like an axe murderer in my belly. Like, we have no idea. And this is where this little playful dialogue sprang up that I just like wrote down and thought, I really think this is a book that the world, because I was teaching self-love at the time, and I was trying to help children have a foundation of self-love. And the feeling behind it was, if children could hear these words from their parents, they would have to grow up knowing how unconditionally lovable they are.
Yeah.
Kind of as a side note to that, this book is now actually been sort of brought up again, like it has a new life in the LGBTQ community, because the book is about unconditional love. And that grain of rice that was in my belly was born, and they said, here's your baby boy. And 2 years ago, a little more than that, that little baby boy became my daughter. And I work now with trans kids and the trans community and the LGBTQ community. And a lot of those kids remember being read that book by their parents and came up to that edge where the unconditional love ran out. And it's so sad and heartbreaking.
Oh my goodness, so full circle. So full circle. I'm going to go back to luck, Lisa. There's no luck. None of this is luck. This is divine. I can't not see that. This is divine. I think there was something for you in a purpose that's bigger than a reason, that put you in the right place at the right time for the work you're doing right now, and the witnessing you're able to do for those people who don't always have a place to be. And your daughter, wow, what a great family to be brought into this world through. So
Everybody says that, I know, and I'm so grateful that she has that, and it's still so hard to know how much the world is stacked against her.
well, in the world as it is today, I have to believe there's a greater purpose in that as well that I can't see. Because when I get stuck in reasonableness, I get all weird about that because I can't make sense of it.
I always tell them, you guys are the superstars. You are here to move humanity forward. You are here to teach all these people compassion, teach all these people what they most need to learn, and what is obviously so difficult for so many of them. You are here as the teachers. So I think there is something about that being very divinely guided.
So you are the mentor that maybe you didn't have when you were on that journey yourself at 14, picking up a random book. Now it sounds like kids, because kids know themselves so much better than I knew myself.
Right? They have no idea how much better their whole generation is. They don't see it. I'm like, oh, you guys are lucky compared to, you guys have tried to do this in my day. Would not have been a thing.
Right. Well, and I think I would like to believe it's because we are evolving as a human species. Doesn't always feel like it. And I suppose as the evolution pulls us into a higher awareness of things, then the ego has to pull us down because it's scary. Maybe we're just experiencing that place in between where the kids you're talking about and dealing with and writing for are the ones who are going to be able to live in a whole different environment.
Yeah. I talk about that a lot, that it's sometimes the contrast is necessary. It's that pulling back the bow. You have to pull it really far back sometimes to get it to the arrow to fly where you want it to. And we're definitely in a pullback moment.
So 40 books yourself, and wow, over how many? You said it's
a lot of those were children's books back when I was doing that. Yeah.
And you have a newer one out now, right? What's your newest one?
No, I have one coming out next year, will be the next one out. The latest one, well, there were some collaborations, but the latest one out in my own name is over 10 years old now.
Oh, okay. So the one I've been
so
watching is the one that's coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. And the collaborations, how did that come about for you? Was it through your Hay House experience? Because you have a lot of cool people's names in there.
Originally, yes, but like I'm thinking of the James Van Prague, that was through Hierophant Publishing.
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of people, Jody.
I'm looking at your list on my wow.
And it is always that, oh, this is why this person was in my life. Like you were saying, there really are no coincidences. So much of it is just a friendship that leads to one thing and another thing, and it all dovetails. But I did recently pretty much give up the ghostwriting. It stopped being fulfilling to me. In the Joy School, I teach, so much about tuning into what's bringing you joy and what's lighting you up, and just streamlining in that direction to the greatest degree possible. And for some, it's, not possible 100%. But I just love teaching and being with people and being in conversation and being in community so much more. The writer's life is so isolating. And that caused me to kind of close down the ghostwriting.
So tell me a little bit about ghostwriting. How I know that you get zero credit for being the voice for people who are very famous and end up on Oprah and end up on shows. So how did you get into ghostwriting?
My first ghostwriting, and I can talk about this one because it's really on a case by case basis. I got known kind of early on for, yes, the ironclad confidentiality, meaning there will be no acknowledgement, no, co-author, no anything. And that's how word spread. So I was fine with that. But my very first job was with Roma Downey, the actress. She had a daughter and wanted, her daughter's favorite book was I Love You, Stinky Face.
Mhm.
And so she wanted to write it was called Love is a Family. And it was about how families look all different ways. And a family doesn't have to look like this. A family is just love. So that was my first ghostwriting gig. I was like, I don't know if I can ghostwrite, but I worked with her and she was lovely. And we did that. And then from there, it was just kind
Word
of
of mouth,
organic.
then people hear about
Yeah,
you and then
pretty
they're
much.
okay. So for those of you who don't know, ghostwriting is probably a lot more prevalent than we know because like you said, there's confidentiality. We see all these amazing people writing amazing books, and very often they're not writing the books. They're narrating, or maybe you could maybe tell that process a little bit more, Lisa. They talk to you and you write their words, basically. Is that how it works?
The process is different with every client. Some of them just want to do that, just want to have the conversations, and I record the conversations. But my jam pretty much was spiritual teachers or personal growth teachers who had hours and hours and hours of on stage speaking, TED Talks, maybe an online training, all these different components, but they didn't have a book and they needed a book for credibility. And it was just, here's this big dump of stuff. Lisa, turn this into my book. So because
Wow.
really the publishers, and this is like kind of a sad thing about publishing now, but it's absolutely true and everybody knows it. The publishers are much more interested in your platform, your reach, your audience, than they are the content of your book. They have a stable of editors and writers who can write the book. They're looking for some way to spearhead sales and to be out there. And that's a taxing life. If you're on the road, if you're going to all the conferences, you don't have time to write a book too. So to really maximize the potential for someone like that, it's like, here's all the material, here's a good writer, let's put these pieces together.
Yeah. And there's something, I'm such a purist when it comes to things like that, that it hurts my heart too to believe that but it's a business, and I understand the huge dilemma, because how would we make a living if how would we have a life we want to live without being able to make a living? And so there's two sides to that.
I know.
That's a whole other conversation.
And it used to be hard to write a book. You used to have to type a manuscript. And if you made a mistake, you had to backspace with the little white paper and, right? So not that many people did it. So publishers would get a certain amount of manuscripts. They could go through the manuscripts, find a gem, and then make a star out of that person. Suddenly it became really easy to write a book and everybody wanted to do it. And the publishers just, they had to get the interns in place, and then the below the intern, unpaid intern, and the screener. And they had to have a weeding process. And so the weeding process is, what's their platform? What's their reach? How are they going to sell the book? And that's why so many really wonderful books never even make it to the decision makers. And that's part also why I gave up ghostwriting, is this: people would come to you with this beautiful idea, this beautiful soul who wants to express this idea. And you'd have to just really honestly say, like, we're going to do the best we can. We're going to make the best book that we can possibly make. I'm going to get you a killer book proposal. We're going to get it sent in. But I'm sorry, honey, I don't think this book's going to sell because you got 2,000 people in your Instagram. It's like,
right.
That's just the truth of it.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
It is. And it depends, I suppose, at some level on what's the purpose, what's the why behind the book itself. Is it to sell more speaking gigs? Is it to do something on a huge scale? Or is it because they tell you at some point the 3 things you need to do before you die are plant a tree, have a child, and write a book? and if that's it, then I'll write a book and I'll just get the book out there, because there's certainly nothing wrong with that.
I knew that. Are those the 3 things that we're supposed to
do?
I
don't know. I've heard that before, and I'm like, well, I got 2. I'll never have the 3rd. I don't have children, but I have planted a tree and I have it.
Yeah,
So,
that's fun.
so you got out of the ghostwriting part of it, and then you have to tell us, you alluded to Joy School. So please tell us how Joy School was born.
Joy School is this ever evolving little weird entity that is how I help people to find joy. Because to me, it's like once you've peeked behind the veil, once you have felt that current that is possible, there's nothing that you can do with your life that could even compare to helping people to peek behind the veil. Just like looking around at the world and knowing that the vast majority have never peeked behind the veil. It's like, it's so compelling to just want to do that in any way you can. So writing books has been about that. And I've always done some form of teaching. When the Hay House book came out, I had an online school and I had a in-person workshops, and I've always done some form of that. And a few years ago, I just decided to call it Joy School. Actually, it was when my business was called Love Shack before COVID hit, because there was always speakers in, and we had, group things. I would either host it at my house where I could have like 30 to 35 people, or we'd find a venue depending on the speaker. And I'm all about collaboration. I love bringing other voices to the table. There's only so much that I know that I can say. I want to always add to that chorus. So Joy School became the online Love Shack. And it started out with workshops and one-offs, and I've had lunchtime sessions, all different formats. But for the last few years, it's been small groups that meet weekly, and a new practice is given every week, and we go take it into our lives. Because for me, that's been the biggest shift in vibration elevation, what we call raising your joy set point, your day-to-day default pattern for how much joy you experience in your day-to-day walking life. And the biggest understanding for me has been that it's not about chasing the light bulb moments. I love the light bulb moments. I love that new book or that new understanding or that new practice or meditation and having all that go off. But that's just the candy. That's not going to elevate your joy set point. It's taking them and applying them to your life. So that's what Joy School is all about. Every week we take something new and go and apply it to our lives. Come back the next week, talk about it as a group. Everyone gets to know one another really, really well. The walls come down so fast. The vulnerability is so beautiful. They've made lifelong friends. They've traveled states, across many states to meet one another in person. And it's really because we all have this shared understanding that it requires some effort. It requires a little bit of commitment, and taking it into our lives is the key. And even if like you took it into your life that week and it didn't really fit the way I wanted it to, when you hear that your other group mate had that, it keeps you inspired to keep up the practice until you get that the other group mate had. So I've just sort of whittled it down really by following my own joy to the point where this is how I get the most nourished and fed in delivering these things that I've learned, because I've learned a crap ton of things, and I just love passing them on, and I love watching the group unfold and the group experience. So it's really about my joy.
No, that's so brilliant. And Love Shack was in person, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said it was at your home, and you had up to 30 people that could come to your home, or you'd have different venues and different speakers. And then the last time probably either of us flew or was anyplace else before the pandemic was together in San Diego in March 1st of 2020. And then you were forced to shift, right? Forced to shift to online. So when you were in person, how many people were you? You said one every now and then you'd do a thing, but did you have a group that would meet regularly at all?
Various groups. Yeah, we had a group that came to my house like every week for like ongoing workshops. That was like 12. But in terms of the when a speaker would come, maybe the most would be like 120. It would never be people traveling across the country. It was known as kind of a local thing. But we had speakers that would come from far away, but just the local tribe.
And this was in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then after San Diego, when we all had to shift to Zoom, how did that affect everything? The Love Shack was no more, turned into Joy School. How was that process for you?
I think the first thing I did was I put Love Shack Dish together, which was a weekly Zoom in a more casual way. And then then it transitioned. I have a teaching partner, just a cherished friend of mine, Rob Mack, and we decided that together to, help people cope with this new crazy thing that everyone was dealing with, that we would, I think the first one was an 8-week consciousness training. And, I don't even remember all the evolutions, but it just sort of grew from there.
And now is it strictly, you said, I saw on your website, you're going to get back in person?
Yeah, probably. It hasn't happened yet. Florida's weird, Jody. Florida's a very strange land. So I almost did. I had some in-person things on at one point, and it's like, oops, nope. So it's like, I'm just waiting till it feels completely 100% sane. We're not quite there.
Oh, are you going to get there? Are we ever going to get to 100% sane in the world? We'll hold out hope. So
I don't have a lot on COVID, okay. But once I started saying that I'm going to, then I had a lot of helpful advice. Well, are you going to ask for vaccination cards? Are you going to do this? Are you going to set up? Or does everyone have to wear masks? Like, you know what? I don't really want to get into all that, so I'm just going to wait until nobody's asking me any of those questions.
Doesn't feel very joyful, does it?
No, it kind of saps the joy out of it.
So how has it been though? Now, have you had more of a reach, I'm guessing, because it's not limited to a geographical place?
Yeah, and I love that about it. I know, people talk about Zoom fatigue. I spend my whole day on Zoom. I don't get Zoom fatigue. I don't mind. I'm just so grateful that there's a way to share energy. And in a sense, when you're limited to locality, that really limits the tribe, and you can get so much more nuanced in what you're attracting when you have the magnet that has that huge reach all across the country and world. We have people outside of the States in the joy trainings. So it is really cool to watch that happen, to watch like what the magnet can do with the local restrictions lifted.
Right.
I feel like the groups are even a little more aligned now than they were when they were.
Yeah, I bet they are. So if I think about teaching joy, that just seems kind of weird, and not in a bad way. Like, how do you teach joy?
It's so funny. I know. So joy, the way we define joy in Joy School is that it's a freedom feeling. So it's not happiness. It's not happy school, because nobody can be happy all the time, but you can be in a state of joy all the time when you're not resisting the normal, natural gamut of emotions that we humans are privy to, when you're embracing of them, welcoming of them, when you're able to surrender and witness yourself in each emotion. There can be joy in anger, there can be joy in grief, joy in sadness, joy in pain, when we, what it's all about, all of Joy School, and you can tell me if there's a better word than joy, because I'm always looking for the right word. It's the recognition of the part of us that's not the meat suit, and the thoughts and the feelings that go on with the meat suit. It's the recognition of that other part of us. It's been called a million things by different teachers. We use a lot of Eckhart Tolle terminology. He calls it the horizontal self versus the vertical self. We're doing Michael Singer right now. He calls it the psyche is the external self, and then there's the inner self. Some people just say the soul or the spirit, but we all have one, and that's where joy is, because we're all naturally joyful and full of love at our source. That is our source. That's what source is. And all of us have accumulated some obstructions to that being our day-to-day experience of ourselves. So Joy School is about that deep recognition and sort of looking at the obstructions, and one by one learning how to not obliterate them. We don't go to war with the obstructions. We become so detached from them through our observation practice that the energy drains out of them, and our corks want to float, right? We are joyful beings. That's our most natural essence. So finding out what those obstructions are and working with them just allows that to happen naturally. So that's why I use the word joy, I think, because, if I made it sound super spiritual, that would ostracize a lot of people. But basically, everybody is here wanting joy in their lives, and joy is the outcome of doing this work. So it's just going straight to, what are we working toward? It's joy, because that's our birthright, that's our essence, and it just takes a little attention on it to allow it to surface.
So anything that's not called Joy School then is changed for a marketing purpose, and I don't think you need that.
I'm not
Because,
sure what you mean.
well, think about how
Probably do need some
shiny,
marketing things.
no, but I think shininess for traditional marketing is to get into the funnel and make sure you do the clickbait and
Oh
you find out
yeah.
how you can snag people and get them. All of that does not feel anything like what you're up to. It
Yeah.
feels like well, we can say it here, vibrational mismatch. You know, if we use Esther Hicks words or Abraham Hicks, there's just a vibrational mismatch if we're trying to convince somebody to do something. uh,
Mhm.
and I don't think you need any of that. There's no better way than Joy School.
You felt right into it there. I can't tell you how many helpful offers I've had to help me create a funnel. I still don't know what a funnel is. I don't really understand it. I'm like, no, thank you. I know you love me and you want me to succeed, but that's okay. I don't think that's for me. I believe in everything is energy. Everything is vibration. If I just be the vibration, it'll attract the right people. And so far that's worked. I don't want to attract the wrong people, right? And unless you're attracting vibrationally, how can you be sure you're attracting the right people?
So I work this is off this. It'll probably come up when you interview me, but I'm working with a spiritual coach. I don't know what to call him either, but I hired him during 2020. I probably should wait and not tell you this because it'll come up later.
We
But
can do it on both. We might not have the same people listening.
okay. Well, he's the how would I describe him? He used to have a marketing agency. He used to be in real estate, and his whole journey has been so fascinating to witness. I met him through another organization I was part of, and I was just really attracted to him, but I ended up not being very attracted to the organization I was part of. I felt that how do you say it nicely, outgrew the container. And he just really, I resonated with him. So he was in real estate. I had been in real estate, and we connected on a lot of different fronts, but his marketing agency, he couldn't do anymore. So he started this thing called Marketing for the Rest of Us, which was around the funnels and on the other side of all of that, so that the people like you, the people who are doing work that has a spiritual dimension, that has something more to it, would have a place to be. Because the people who are like I'm a life coach, people who are in these woo-woo squishy kinds of areas don't always find themselves to be the best salespeople, because trying, I guess maybe that's the
Yeah,
energy. The
for
energy of
sure.
trying doesn't attract the people you want anyway. So he's now created what he calls, his company's called My Groundswell.
Mm.
What's your message in the world? What's your groundswell? And he now has what he calls Groundswell University, and we call it business church for life coaches. And it's so good because he's doing things completely differently. And what you just described about the funnel, that's what he's doing. Alternative to funnel marketing.
That sounds lovely. Sounds like you've found a resonance. That's what it's all about. It's like when
Yeah.
you hear about it and you say, yes, that's for me,
Yeah.
you just have to follow that. We have to trust that voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it sounds like you're finding. The people who are finding you, or you're finding them.
Absolutely. I am always just like tingly when I end a group session and think like, oh, the synchronicities, the perfection. There we are with that word again. It's always perfect. It's always the different groups. They just, even if they come in looking like they have completely different out theirs, we call it, with a capital O and a capital T. Even if your out there is completely different, their in here's are all alike. It's
Mhm.
beautiful.
So what are their out there's typically? Like, are they all different kinds of walks of life, different kinds of occupations? Who are these people that find you?
I would say most are women in their second half. Women like me, women who aren't this, but then we definitely have had some young women, so I can't say that. And we always have men. We have a young gentleman, my age gentleman, and an older gentleman in one of the groups right now. So there are always men. They're usually not as many, but it's probably a pretty close demographic to who does most spiritual work.
So are they individuals then? It sounds like it's a place for individuals who are not leading teams at work or doing things like that. It's not a,
Yeah, no, it's not like that at all. It's just individual people.
well, that's who's going to change the world, right? And we've talked about that already today, about what we need to do in the next, I don't know, iteration of the universe.
Yeah.
And you could probably help with this. I know Wayne. When I met Wayne Dyer, that was my best. When I got to meet him, the things that I learned from him through the course of his life, as I followed him as well, it takes fewer people vibrating at a higher frequency to actually lift the world. Is that how
Isn't that
you?
cool? I know I've heard that a bunch of places too, that you would think like, okay, if there's 800 billion people, we have to have 400 billion plus one, but no, because it's energetic, and the people who are vibrating higher have a bigger energetic footprint and are making bigger vibratory waves on the planet. So it's really not like a hundredth monkey thing, or it is a hundredth monkey thing, but the hundredth monkey could be tomorrow for all we know. I mean, even though the people who are interested in personal growth and spirituality, I've heard rumored to be less than 2% of people on the planet, that the vibrational frequency is great enough to make a shift. And I think that's all it's going to take. Is at some point there'll be a tipping point, and more people will start getting that first little opening. And that's really all it takes, right? Once you get that first glimpse, that first opening, you just want to get that crowbar in there.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So this is a kind of a lower vibrational question. So how will we know? How will we know that we're making any kind of a dent in the universe?
Oh, I don't think we can. I think we just got to keep doing it. That question took me right to one of my podcast guests a few months ago, Eric Meisel. And it was just so funny because everybody who comes to my podcast, we talk about the state of the world, and everybody always shares my opinion that yes, like you expressed earlier, we're making progress. Just look how far we've come. And yes, it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And Eric Meisel, this very learned, schooled, like total like rock star out there, I asked him some form of that question, and he's like, oh no, it's no, we're screwed basically. And I was like, what? Nobody says that on this podcast. What? It was really funny. I'm totally paraphrasing. Go back and listen to my podcast. Don't like tell Eric Meisel I said that. But I think that his point is that you can't concern yourself with that.
Yeah.
We are each here to do our piece. And if you commit yourself fully to doing your piece, you will have a high vibration existence. You will live heaven on earth. You will have all the perks of everything that vibration can bring you if you just focus on your piece. If you try to look beyond that, it doesn't do anybody any good. That's what he said.
Ooh, that's great advice. Because it gets so difficult. I mean, you've been in business. You're a business person. I mean, when you get into that space of results, everything has to be on results that can be measured. You can get caught up in that programming, and so then when you don't see the world's results, what's the point?
Yeah. I know. And I think I have that with the trans kids a lot, that they just see, like, why are we even advocating? Look at how it's stacked against us and everything's moving backwards. But yeah, it's just, we are vibrational beings. It sounds woo-woo. It is woo-woo, but it's also true that we create an impact on everyone around us, in our households, in the store that we walk into, at the gas station. We are sending out ripples at all times, and our stewardship has to just be first and foremost around our own energy, keeping our own energy as pure and clean and high vibration as we can. And that does make a difference. And I think it's Gweth who said, if everybody swept their own doorstep, the whole world would be clean. There's a lot of quotes like that. Like we just really lose the main point when we put our gaze out beyond our own little energetic circle.
Such great reminders. So your podcast is called Do Joy. And how long have you had your podcast?
Not very long. I started it, I think I'm only in the 40s. I've done one weekly, and I'm at like 42 or 45, something like that right now. So it's been not very long. I was offered the opportunity to do it, and it was supposed to be about the joy trainings. And I said, oh, can I have guests? And they said, sure, you can have guests. I'm like, okay. So it started out the joy trainings with a guest here and there. And again, I realized, oh, it's way more fun for me when I have the guests. Like I know everything I'm going to say. I don't mind, talking into the void. I'm kind of used to talking into the void. It's not a big deal. I could do it, but I just get more excited about bringing collaboration and having the juicy conversations with fascinating people. So it's just kind of turned completely into that. It's just, I mean, some of the early ones have some of the joy trainings in them and they get sprinkled in throughout, even with the guests. But yeah, it's just been so much fun. I love doing this. I had a radio show 12 years ago for a couple of years, and I loved that to death. So this is just, going back full circle to that.
It is. Oh, it's so, and I love it too. It's so much
You
fun
can
to,
tell. Yeah.
like you said, I mean, it's for the connection. It's for how would I say this? You're in Florida, I'm in North Dakota, and it doesn't matter at this point who I become because of the conversations I get to have with you, because you inspire me, makes a difference to my gas station. And then in your gas station in Florida, it has the same opportunity. And I see that as such a great feeling.
Yeah, because energy works over Zoom. People say like, oh, but you're on Zoom. It's not the same. It's not the same. Obviously, it's not the same, but there is an energy exchange. Energy is non-local. It's like we are completely having that right now. It doesn't matter. Miles don't matter.
Miles don't matter. So good. So good. So Lisa, if people wanted to find you and wanted to follow you and become part of the Joy School or anything you're doing, how would they do that? What's the best way?
It's my name, lisamccourt.com.
Easy enough, lisamccourt.com. You will find a lot of things there. I have subscribed to some of your things, and there are some questionnaires and things that you'll get back that ask you questions about yourself. Because as you said earlier, if everything is about, this gets sound funny, but if everything's about me and everything's about what I can do in my world, why would it not be a good thing to give more to help each individual person vibrate higher?
Absolutely. We think right now, because the world is terrible and there are shootings and there are wars and there's all this, we think that joy is a luxury and we don't deserve to look at joy and why I can't go there right now. My mind's on all these important matters. And we have no idea how valuable our joy is, our vibration is. It's the very best thing we can do for ourselves, for those around us, and the world.
And then imagine what the organizations where people are employed or are engaged, if they're not doing this for that purpose necessarily, to bring back to my team or to do this. However, once the transformation happens for the individual, it can't help but spill over into wherever that person is doing the work that person is doing. And that's where I get really excited, because that's my work is more in organizations and
Right.
helping people like that. It's just so exciting, and it takes the place of all that heaviness and all the things you described earlier. Just knowing there's somebody like you spreading joy, reminding people of their joy, especially kids who maybe don't have another place to get that. In some cases, those trans kids who don't have a community, that's relatively new, that whole feeling safe enough to be real about that part of people's lives. It's just so not funny, haha, but so ironic that you have a child who decided that it was okay to tell you.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah, people think like, oh, it's this new fad. Everybody's trans now. It's been the same percentage of people throughout time. An example that I like to use is that we used to shame kids who would try to use their left hands to write. They would be slapped with the rulers. We'd be told, no, you're wrong. We best retrain you to write with your right hand. And it seemed like there was a very small percentage of left-handers out there in the world that needed to be corrected. And then as soon as whatever powers that be decided, oh, it's no big deal, suddenly there was a huge rise in left-handers and then a plateau. This is just, now we know exactly what percentage of people are left-handed because there's no reason not to be. It's the same thing. Like they're seeing themselves in the world, in the media, in the culture, and they're able to say, oh my gosh, I can finally express what's been inside me all this time. So it's a beautiful thing. It feels so icky and hard and gross, but it really is moving us toward a really positive end.
Yeah. Oh, what a pleasure. What a joy. What a
What
joy.
a joy.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy that you'll be on Do Joy now. We
Yeah,
can
we can exchange our
play
joy.
some more.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jody. I really loved being with you.
Take care, everybody. And as always, go be real. Okay, I'll stop.